Imagine a typical ugly nerdy loser who cares more about studying than touching grass or touching plot. Yet the anime gods still bestowed him with so much riz that he somehow creates a harem of 5 cute girls, including his teacher. And thankfully this is one of the rare harem animes that actually has a proper ending for once, so make sure to watch until the end. This crazy adventure begins when Nariyuki, the aforementioned ugly loser, is summoned to the headmaster's office and is asked to tutor 2 girls that are considered untutorable, but are also geniuses in their respective fields. Rizu is a genius in the fields of math and science, and is nicknamed the Tiny Computer due to being under 5 feet tall, and using her massive plot as processing power, I assume. Fumino, on the other hand, is a genius in the fields of art and literature and is nicknamed Sleeping Beauty due to her tendency to fall asleep during class. But despite being geniuses, both girls are clueless idiots when it comes to other subjects. And because Nariyuki unfortunately comes from a poor family, he has no choice but to accept this request from the headmaster in exchange for a scholarship, but he has no idea how he's supposed to tutor 2 geniuses. Later that day at the park, both girls act a bit cold and distant, and Rizu even tells Nariyuki that he's just gonna abandon them like all their previous tutors before him. But he reassures them that he literally can't afford to give up on them, which makes Fumino suddenly very happy. And once they've opened up a bit, Nariyuki learns that Fumino wants to study science, while Rizu wants to study literature, which greatly shocks Nariyuki as this is the opposite of each other's fields of expertise. To make matters worse, Nariyuki quickly realizes that much like my viewers, Fumino is completely useless at math because she gets overwhelmed by numbers, while Rizu is completely useless at literature because it requires interpretation rather than calculation. But I personally think Rizu should be great at literature because she's already an expert in massive plot. So Nariyuki suggests that the girls should just tutor each other in science and literature, but Fumino and Rizu both respond that they don't know how to dumb down their respective expertise, much to Nariyuki's annoyance. Feeling like they're wasting their genius, Nariyuki advises them to just give up, and to attend universities that cater to their natural talents instead. But upon hearing this, Rizu stands up and angrily tells Nariyuki that she's fed up with people always telling her to pursue a life she won't be happy with, and claims that Nariyuki is now abandoning them just like their tutors before. Rizu then storms off, with Fumino soon following her lead. The next day at school, Nariyuki apologizes to the girls for being ugly, and gives them the study materials that he spent all night working on for them, much to their surprise. He then passionately proclaims that he'll never abandon them no matter what, and promises to make both of them happy. Fumino is completely shocked by this, while Rizu is simply disgusted, as they mistakenly believe that Nariyuki is confessing his love to both of them at the same time. But after clearing up the misunderstanding, the girls thank Nariyuki for his support, and the 3 of them head to the library to study together. And once there, Nariyuki realizes that he's sandwiched between the 2 most popular girls in school, and that tutoring beautiful anime babes might be harder than he thought. But I'm sure that's not the only thing that's hard right now. And when Nariyuki walks Fumino home later that day, he finds her absent-mindedly looking at the stars as if she's got no brain cells left, and learns that she wants to study science to become an astronomer, because looking at the stars reminds her of her mother who passed away. And Nariyuki promises to help Fumino improve at science, so she can achieve her dreams, which makes her incredibly happy. Later that same evening, Nariyuki stumbles upon Rizu playing a card game alone in a park, and learns that she actually loves board games, but never has anyone to play with. So he offers to play with her, but he's surprised when he absolutely claps her cheeks 20 times in a row. Rizu then admits that she really sucks at any kind of competitive game, because she struggles to understand people and what they're thinking. That's why she wants to pass the liberal arts exam, and eventually study psychology. And before leaving, Nariyuki tells Rizu that he'll play with her again anytime she wants, which makes her incredibly happy. The next day at school, Rizu and Fumino visit Nariyuki's classroom looking for him, which completely shocks Nariyuki's classmates since he's such a loser. But when he arrives, Rizu and Fumino lean in and whisper to keep what they did last night a secret from everyone else, which sounds very sus, but we all know that Nariyuki is too scared to touch grass, let alone a woman. Anyways, the next day, Uruka, Nariyuki's childhood friend, playfully bumps him on the back as a greeting, and asks if she can borrow his notebook so she can copy off him. This request clearly annoys Nariyuki, who refuses despite her begging, as she's been copying off of him since middle school. Surprisingly, however, Uruka is a genius athlete and an outstanding swimmer, nicknamed the Mermaid Princess. But she's unfortunately also an idiot who's failing most of her subjects, which puts her at risk of losing her sports scholarship. So to avoid that outcome, the headmaster asks Nariyuki to tutor Uruka as well, much to his annoyance. Later on at the school swimming pool, Nariyuki informs Uruka that he'll be tutoring her from now on, but she surprisingly refuses to be tutored by him and runs away playfully. Fumino and Rizu arrive moments later, only to find Nariyuki pinning Uruka down, while shouting that struggling is useless. Fumino then suddenly bashes Nariyuki on the head with a fire extinguisher, followed by Rizu expressing her disgust towards Nariyuki. After clearing up the misunderstanding, Fumino and Rizu introduce themselves to Uruka and explain that Nariyuki is their tutor, and although Uruka originally didn't want to be tutored by him, she mysteriously changes her mind after hearing this, because Uruka has secretly been in love with Nariyuki since middle school, which he obviously never realized, since Nariyuki is your typical dumb harem protagonist with an ape where his brain should be. The next weekend, Rizu visits Nariyuki at his home to seek his help with writing a story for an upcoming test. But when she suddenly receives a text from Uruka inviting her to karaoke, Rizu is simply annoyed by this, and tells her that she's already busy at Nariyuki's place. All of a sudden, Uruka immediately shows up covered in sweat and breathing heavily, as she says that she also came to study plot. But while they study, the power suddenly goes out in Nariyuki's neighborhood, which Uruka finds surprisingly amusing, while Rizu is so frightened due to her fear of the dark that she begins clinging to Nariyuki. And upon seeing this, Uruka pretends to be scared too so that she can also cling to him, but actually becomes far too embarrassed to fully commit, and ends up awkwardly holding onto Nariyuki's shirt instead. But due to the darkness, they accidentally trip, and Nariyuki's hands end up studying plot too. And when the power finally returns, Nariyuki has no idea what he was just squeezing, while Uruka is completely flustered, and Rizu is simply disgusted. The following day, Uruka asks Nariyuki for help on an upcoming English vocabulary test that she can't afford to fail. So Nariyuki tells her to just memorize the words needed for the test, and explains how she can do so, but Uruka is so bad at studying that she becomes visibly worn out just from listening to him. Fumino also tries to help her, but quickly runs out of patience when it's obvious that Uruka is just too dumb. However, Nariyuki comes up with an ingenious plan to combine studying with swimming, and Uruka eventually manages to score a perfect grade on her test thanks to Nariyuki's efforts. Afterwards, Uruka shows her gratitude to Nariyuki by giving him a pencil case, only to later realize that she accidentally gave him her unwashed swimsuit instead, while she still has the pencil case. Sometime later, the headmaster orders Nariyuki to help Fumino and Rizu score average grades or higher on their midterms, a goal that every tutor before him has failed to reach. But after Nariyuki leaves, the girls walk by the headmaster's office and overhear Kirisu, one of the school's teachers and the girls' former tutor, as she advises the headmaster to remove Nariyuki as their tutor if the girls fail their midterms. Hearing this greatly demotivates the girls, who are afraid of losing Nariyuki. So to prepare for the upcoming midterms, Rizu invites Nariyuki to her family's udon restaurant to help her study. Nariyuki agrees, but soon regrets this decision when Rizu's father threatens Nariyuki not to get any weird ideas about his daughter. However, Rizu smacks her father on the head and tells him to go back to work, much to her father's dismay, who continues to hold his tongue as he watches Rizu and Nariyuki study together. Their study session lasts until evening, and as Nariyuki leaves, Rizu anxiously asks him what will happen if she doesn't do well on the midterm exams. But Nariyuki pats her head and reassures her that if she fails, they'll just have to study harder for the next test. Rizu is relieved that Nariyuki doesn't plan to abandon her, but knocks his hand away after a few awkward seconds and tells him not to treat her as a child. On the day of the midterm exams, Rizu thinks back to all the tutors who told her to give up on literature and focus on math and science instead. But upon realizing that Nariyuki has been the only one who never gave up on her, Rizu gains the confidence needed to finish the test. After the exam, Rizu presents her exam score to Nariyuki and Uruka, who are both astounded to see that she gained an above-average score. Rizu notes that it's the highest score she's ever gotten in a literature exam, while Nariyuki is driven to tears of joy by this. Fumino also scores above average in her math exam, and with both girls having passed their midterms, Nariyuki is allowed to remain their tutor, and the group celebrates together at a restaurant. Sometime later, Fumino is shocked to realize that she's somehow gained weight, and she's depressed as she has no idea what could have caused this. But upon entering the classroom, Uruka and Rizu both shower her with snacks, which she immediately eats without hesitation, as she loves snacks too much to resist. That's when she realizes that this is why she gained weight, and vows to never eat snacks again. But after dieting for a week, and somehow resisting the urge to eat all the snacks that the gang keeps bringing, Fumino is disappointed to learn that she hasn't lost any weight at all. But when Nariyuki notices that Fumino is too hungry to focus on her studies, he insists that she's already thin and tries to feed her some candy by force. In response, Fumino shows Nariyuki her stomach and forces him to touch it, to prove that she's a lil fatty, which obviously completely flusters both of them. But while walking Fumino home after school, Nariyuki learns that Fumino always eats a bunch of snacks late at night, because she thinks that studying at night makes her burn more calories. And after chastising her for being a complete moron, Fumino stops eating late night snacks, and her weight returns to normal. The next day at school, Rizu is confronted by Sawako, the president of the science club, who considers herself Rizu's rival, despite Rizu not even remembering who she is. Nevertheless, Sawako admits that she's been spying on Rizu, and knows that she's in love with Nariyuki. But Rizu calmly denies this by claiming that wasting energy on something like love is just inefficient. Unconvinced by this, Sawako decides to join Rizu on one of her study sessions with Nariyuki and watches them intently. In order to get a reaction out of Rizu, Sawako starts getting closer to Nariyuki and asks him all kinds of personal questions. However, Rizu is unbothered by this and continues her studies. Nariyuki, on the other hand, is confused by Sawako's sudden interest in him and begins to mistakenly believe that she has a crush on him, which she of course adamantly denies. After being kicked out for being too noisy, Nariyuki comes to realize that Sawako just wants to be Rizu's friend, but doesn't know how to interact with her. That's when he whispers to her that he studies with Rizu in the library on Mondays and Wednesdays, and that she's welcome to join them anytime. However, Sawako rejects his invitation, but says that it's possible she might run into them by chance. The next day, Nariyuki and Rizu arrive at the library, only to find Sawako already waiting there for them, but she tries to pretend as if this is just a coincidence. Sometime later, during an intensive study retreat in the mountains, Fumino notices that for some reason, Rizu is constantly staring at Nariyuki. Rizu even becomes flustered when he tries talking to her, and when she sees him having fun with Fumino and the others, it puts her in a bad mood, and she decides to run outside to blow off some steam, but soon becomes lost. Miserable, Rizu daydreams about Nariyuki coming to rescue her. As the real Nariyuki searches for her everywhere, despite the pouring rain, he eventually finds her on a cliff and reaches his hand out to help her. But Rizu is embarrassed at being rescued and becomes irritated by this, only to lose her footing and fall into Nariyuki's arms, accidentally kissing him. The next day, Rizu tries to act like nothing happened between them, even when their teacher forces them to clean the baths together as a punishment. And after a series of typical anime shenanigans that I can't show, Rizu apologizes to Nariyuki for causing so much trouble and assures him that the kiss was just an accident. However, when they return to school, Kirisu, their teacher and former tutor, reveals that she knows all about the kiss and begins questioning whether or not Nariyuki is truly a suitable tutor for the girls. Fumino becomes worried when she hears snippets of Kirisu and Nariyuki's conversation, and soon barges into the room to defend Nariyuki, but only seems to make the situation worse. Rizu also barges into the room to defend him, but she's not much help either. Luckily, Kirisu decides to drop the matter and simply warns Nariyuki to be more prudent in the future. Nariyuki then spots injuries to Kirisu's hand, and realizes that she had also been out looking for Rizu, proving that Kirisu secretly cares about the girls too. Upon leaving her office, Nariyuki is met by Uruka, Fumino and Rizu, who are all excited that he made it out scot-free. But as she watches them walk away, Kirisu remains convinced that Nariyuki is leading the girls to unhappy futures. Several days later, Uruka finds out that Nariyuki shared a kiss with someone. Upset by this, she decides to confide in Fumino, though she claims that she's asking for advice for a friend. Fumino sees through this lie, however, and is surprised to learn that Uruka is in love with Nariyuki. Nonetheless, she advises Uruka not to give up. As time goes on, Uruka and Rizu's scores both drop dramatically due to their minds being preoccupied by the kiss, which causes Fumino to realize that both Uruka and Rizu have a crush on Nariyuki. As such, Fumino advises Nariyuki to try and be considerate of the girls' hearts, but as a typical harem main character with no brain, he misunderstands what Fumino means and believes Uruka and Rizu are in love with someone else. The next day, Fumino accidentally trips into Nariyuki's arms, which greatly angers Rizu. In an attempt to make up for this, Fumino tries to push Nariyuki into Rizu's arms, but instead accidentally pushes him into Rizu's massive plot cushions, which of course embarrasses her tremendously. Fumino later learns that Rizu only looked angry because she was wearing old glasses that forced her to squint, and that Rizu never actually saw her hug Nariyuki. Later that day, Kirisu stumbles upon Nariyuki trying to save a cat from a tree. But when the cat leaps out of the tree, Kirisu catches it and sprains her ankle in the process. Nariyuki helps her home and discovers that despite being completely professional at school, at home, Kirisu is an absolute slob. He insists on tidying up her apartment, and while cleaning, discovers Kirisu's figure skating awards. She explains that she used to be a genius figure skater, but had to give it up as it was not a viable career, which is why she wants the girls to use their talents, since she was unable to make use of hers. In response, Nariyuki claims that he would rather the girls regret failing than not try at all. After he leaves, Kirisu reveals that she was actually extremely flustered at having a man in her apartment for the first time, despite appearing calm on the outside. As time passes, a rumor begins to spread that Nariyuki is dating Fumino due to them spending so much time together. This leads to Nariyuki becoming the target of Fumino's fan club, who want to make sure he's worthy of their queen's love. But they quickly become disappointed by the lack of romance between the two, and the fan club decides to just abandon the rumor, much to Fumino's relief. After school, Nariyuki apologizes to Fumino about the rumor of them dating, but she responds by asking if they should just go out for real. She instantly retracts this, however, and claims she was only joking. But Nariyuki is notably flustered by this, and Fumino thinks to herself that she'd never fall in love with someone her friends already love. During summer break, Nariyuki decides to attend cram school, where he meets Asumi, who he assumes is a middle schooler because of how petite she is. But in reality, she's a senior who's studying to get into medical school, despite having already failed her entrance exam once. As they spend more time together in class, Nariyuki and Asumi begin to bond over how tough cram school courses can be. After school, while trying to find the nearby train station, two suspicious men grab Nariyuki and guide him to a maid cafe named High Stage, where he's shocked to find Asumi working there as a maid. Asumi is equally embarrassed to have Nariyuki learn of her job, but she needs the money to pay for medical school. Just as he's about to leave, Nariyuki sees her study materials and realizes that she's terrible at science. The other maids then decide to bribe him with free drinks every day in order for him to tutor Asumi in science, which he does for several days. After some time passes, Nariyuki introduces the study group to Asumi, who is immediately adored by the girls due to her petite stature. But the very next day, all three girls begin attending cram school to keep tabs on Nariyuki's relationship with Asumi. Later that night, Kirisu leaves a social gathering with her co-workers, and on her way home, catches Nariyuki heading into the High Stage cafe. As she tries to admonish Nariyuki from entering such a place, Asumi appears and reveals that she was actually a former student of Kirisu's. While fighting over Nariyuki, Kirisu loses her grip and falls backward, injuring one of the maids and forcing Kirisu to temporarily replace her. Asumi then has Kirisu practice her introductions with Nariyuki, which mortifies her but arouses him. Throughout the night, Nariyuki helps Kirisu with her duties, even when she insists on doing it. This makes Kirisu develop a newfound respect for him, as she recalls the time the girls barged into her office to defend him. At the end of the night, Kirisu accidentally gets drunk on only one sip of alcohol, and Nariyuki has no choice but to carry her home. The next day, Kirisu runs into Nariyuki again, and the two walk home together. Kirisu reminisces about never being able to have a social life when she was younger due to her skating, so Nariyuki buys her some ice cream to cheer her up, only for Fumino and Rizu to also appear at the ice cream shop moments later. Nariyuki and Kirisu then hide in the nearby bushes to avoid being seen by the two. But when Fumino and Rizu show no intentions of wanting to leave, a desperate Nariyuki decides to pretend that he and Kirisu are a kissing couple, causing the two girls to flee in embarrassment without recognizing him. After an eventful day, they finally make it to Kirisu's apartment, only to be spotted by Asumi, who delights in embarrassing them both mercilessly. On the night of a summer festival, Nariyuki bumps into Fumino and Uruka, who are enjoying the festival together in their beautiful yukatas, which Nariyuki compliments them on. Fumino then claims that she has to go somewhere and do something, and leaves Uruka alone with Nariyuki. While they walk through the festival together, they come across a food stall run by Rizu's family. Seeing that Rizu is struggling, Nariyuki decides to help her deliver food, while Uruka helps Rizu's father cook. Once they're finished with their deliveries, Rizu returns to the food stall, and Nariyuki is left alone. It's then that he notices a mask-wearing Kirisu collecting a bunch of prizes at a shooting gallery. Kirisu, who is surprised to see Nariyuki, attempts to run away, but trips and hurts herself instead, requiring him to carry her to a medical tent, which is unsurprisingly run by Asumi and her father. And Asumi decides to let the flustered Nariyuki treat Kirisu himself. Later, both Fumino and Nariyuki accidentally miss the last train home. With no place to go, they head to a nearby inn. But when they learn that there's only one room with a single bed available, they convince the innkeeper that they're just siblings. But let's be honest, that certainly never stopped anime main characters before. In their room, it immediately gets awkward as they both try and distract themselves from erotic thoughts by talking with each other. This doesn't work, however, so they decide to do some stargazing instead. Nariyuki admits that he thinks it's admirable for Fumino to have a dream, whereas he has no idea what his dream is. As they fall asleep hand in hand, Fumino reassures him that she'll be there to support him when he figures his dream out. The next morning, the two take the train home and are both notably unnerved due to waking up in each other's arms. Later that same summer, Rizu feels confident that all her studying is starting to pay off, but when she sees that she got an E on a practice exam, she tells the girls about her low grade, who all mistakenly assume that she is talking about her bra size, and are shocked that Rizu dropped from F cups to E cups. Rizu then asks them what grades they got, and despite Fumino being too embarrassed to answer, Asumi and Uruka both happily state that they have B cups and D cups respectively, which forces a flustered Fumino to reveal that she has AA cups. In response, Rizu expresses her envy of Fumino getting such a high grade, which angers Fumino as she believes Rizu is mocking her tiny plot. After the misunderstanding is cleared, the girls continue to talk about their chests until Asumi mentions that all men love big milk bags, including Nariyuki, who she claims is secretly a man of culture. Later that day, while being tutored by Nariyuki, Rizu can't stop thinking about Asumi's comment, and wonders if Nariyuki truly is secretly a huge plot lover. Suddenly, Nariyuki asks her about the E grade she got on the test, which Rizu misunderstands, thinking he is boldly asking about her plot size. She responds that she used to be an F but is a G now. Nariyuki immediately begins to panic, as he didn't even know that getting G as a grade was possible. Despite this, he reassures her that a G isn't so bad, as it simply means she has more room to grow. Rizu is shocked that Nariyuki wants her huge airbags to grow even more, and begins to believe that he really is secretly a cultured man after all. But Rizu decides to accept him as he is, and offers to let Nariyuki touch her plot in order to make him happy, just as her furious father arrives to confront Nariyuki about this. Once the misunderstanding is finally cleared up, Rizu is embarrassed about the whole thing, but is still determined to improve her grades. Before they leave, however, Rizu catches Nariyuki stealing glances at her Giga Mountains, as he simply can't believe that she wears something as massive as G cups. The next day, Nariyuki tutors the girls as usual, but trouble ensues when Fumino accidentally calls Nariyuki by his first name, and the girls demand to know when they became so close. In reality, this was a habit she picked up when spending the night at an inn with Nariyuki, and the two had to pretend to be siblings by using each other's first names. But she refuses to let Nariyuki tell the other girls about this, even though nothing happened between them. Wanting to deepen their friendship as well, Rizu threatens Nariyuki to call him Mr. Horndog if he doesn't start calling her by her first name. At the end of the day, however, the group decides to call everyone by their first names. The next weekend, Asumi's job begins offering housekeeping services to customers, and Nariyuki is hired to help her accomplish this new task. The first house they're assigned to clean is surprisingly Kirisu's apartment, which embarrasses her greatly as she doesn't want her students to see how much of a slob she is outside of school. She offers Asumi some money to leave without doing anything, which Asumi refuses because she actually takes pride in her work. Desperate, Kirisu pulls Nariyuki into her apartment and forces him to clean everything up in about 30 minutes while Asumi waits outside. She then lets Asumi inside, who's immediately annoyed that there's nothing left for her to clean. Meanwhile, Nariyuki lays on the floor exhausted. The next place they're tasked with cleaning is Uruka's home, who upon opening the door is shocked to see that Asumi is a maid and that she's with Nariyuki for some reason. Not wanting her beloved Nariyuki to see how much of a mess her house is, Uruka frantically does all the chores herself and even cooks them a delicious meal. Despite enjoying the food, Asumi is once again annoyed that she wasn't able to do her job. Their final customer is Fumino, who is also surprised to see that Asumi is a maid and that Nariyuki is tagging along with her. Similarly to Uruka, Fumino doesn't want to let them enter her house either, otherwise Nariyuki will see the huge mess she caused in the kitchen by trying to cook. So she attempts to bribe them to leave, but when that fails and Asumi insists on cooking and cleaning for her, Fumino has no choice but to lock herself in her house and order udon from Rizu's family shop. When Rizu then arrives with the food, she is also surprised to see that Asumi is a maid. The three of them then eat the noodles together, and Fumino insists that she doesn't need the kitchen cleaned anymore now that she has food. Annoyed that she didn't get to do any work today, Asumi invites herself to Nariyuki's house and cleans it up for him. To his surprise, Nariyuki's younger siblings both take a liking to Asumi and ask her to marry their older brother, which she teasingly agrees to. After cleaning the house, she offers Nariyuki a free ear cleaning to thank him for going along with her today, and continues to teasingly flirt with him, which he does his best to resist. The next day at school, Fumino accidentally falls asleep in Kirisu's class, which infuriates her greatly. That night, Kirisu spends all evening working on an exam for tomorrow's class, but when her laptop's battery dies, she has to start everything over from scratch, and ends up not getting any sleep. This makes her extra grumpy the next day, which causes the students to focus twice as hard in order to avoid her wrath. During the exam, however, Kirisu briefly falls asleep, and is immediately woken up from banging her head against the blackboard, with Nariyuki seemingly being the only student who witnesses this. During her lunch break, she continues to power through her sleepiness in order to stay awake, but this becomes increasingly difficult when later that day, she's forced to listen to the principal's boring speech. Just as she's about to fall asleep, however, Nariyuki loudly fakes a sneeze to help her stay awake. After barely managing to stay awake all day, she finally arrives home, only to discover that she lost her key somewhere, and while frantically looking around town for it, she accidentally runs into Nariyuki, who decides to help her out. But after hours of searching everywhere for the key, Kirisu realizes that it was actually in her handbag the whole time. The two then return to Kirisu's home, who unsurprisingly passes out in the entrance the moment she steps foot inside. With no other choice, Nariyuki embarrassingly carries his teacher to her bed, and decides to clean her apartment as well while he's at it. The next morning, Kirisu has no memory of what happened, but she's proud that she was somehow able to get herself in bed, and even cleaned her entire apartment. Later that same morning, Rizu accidentally cuts off her bangs, due to her father barging into the bathroom and startling her. She's mostly unfazed by this, however, and still acts normal around Fumino and Uruka when they see her new haircut. But she immediately becomes flustered when Nariyuki arrives, and refuses to let him see her face. At school, she decides to put on a weird mask to keep her new haircut hidden from Nariyuki, even though she doesn't understand why she's so embarrassed by the thought of him seeing her. But when Nariyuki begins to believe that Rizu is hiding her face because she hates him, Fumino decides to help clear up the misunderstanding by forcibly removing Rizu's mask. Rizu then embarrassingly waits for Nariyuki to comment on her new haircut, but he just says that he doesn't notice anything different about her, which even annoys Uruka and Fumino. The next day at school, Sawako invites Rizu to go shopping with her for a new pencil case, and Rizu agrees, which completely surprises her. She tries to contain her excitement and play it cool, but fails miserably. And unbeknownst to Rizu, Sawako spends the entire night drafting an itinerary for them to go to various popular dating spots for couples. The next day, however, her plan is ruined when they inadvertently run into Nariyuki. Believing that Rizu would have a better time shopping with him, Sawako decides to let the two enjoy the rest of the day together while she remains alone, and reminisces about her middle school days where her classmates were jealous of her perfect test scores, which isolated her from everyone else, until she met Rizu, who didn't care what her classmates thought of her, a quality which Sawako greatly admired. This inspired her to attend the same high school as Rizu, but it wasn't until her third year that she mustered up the courage to actually talk to her. Suddenly, Nariyuki interrupts her flashback and confronts Sawako about ditching Rizu, as he knows that she was looking forward to spending the day with her. Sawako then admits how much she admires Rizu, which Rizu overhears, but Rizu admits that hearing Sawako's praise makes her happy. She then asks Sawako to continue helping her shop for a pencil case, which makes her so happy that she accidentally trips and falls right onto Rizu's airbags, unwillingly angering Rizu, while exposing herself to the very fortunate Nariyuki. Sometime later, Fumino convinces Rizu to visit a salon owned by the eccentric Ms. Karasuma, who gives her a complete makeover. Afterwards, she meets up with Nariyuki at the library to study with him, but he doesn't recognize her and has no idea who's this stranger brazen enough to sit right next to him. When she sees him acting weird, Rizu touches Nariyuki's head to see if he has a fever, which immediately confirms in his mind that this beautiful stranger is aggressively trying to hit on him. Flustered by this situation, he texts Rizu to hurry up and come, which she reads and misinterprets to mean hurry up on a homework question that she's struggling with. Nariyuki then ends up getting more and more flustered throughout the day as Rizu asks him questions about his personal life and gets uncomfortably close to him. At the end of the day, as they're heading home, Nariyuki has no idea why this beautiful lady is still following him, but he applauds her assertiveness. Meanwhile, Rizu thinks back to something the salon owner said about deepening one's friendship with men, and boldly invites Nariyuki to come back to her place. Nariyuki obviously misunderstands this as an invitation to do the dirty, and agrees to go along with her. But his dreams are quickly crushed when he sees Rizu's dad, and realizes the true identity of the beautiful lady he spent all day with. The next day, Nariyuki studies English with Uruka, and despite extensively studying vocabulary and grammar, Uruka still has no confidence in speaking, so Nariyuki decides that they must converse only in English for the whole day. On their way home, two English-speaking foreigners stop to ask Uruka for directions, which she is surprisingly able to explain to them, with a mixture of broken English and gestures. Afterwards, the men invite Uruka to a nearby barbecue because they think she's so cute, but she becomes too flustered to know how to properly turn them down. Nariyuki arrives moments later to protect Uruka, which leads the men to question his relationship with her. Nariyuki does his best to answer them in English, but his mispronounced answer makes it sound like Uruka is his girlfriend. The two men congratulate him on getting such a cute girlfriend, and wish him good luck before leaving. Meanwhile, Uruka tries to piece together what Nariyuki said, and when she realizes that he called her his girlfriend, she flees in embarrassment. Sometime later at Nariyuki's house, he tutors Fumino in algebra, while his little sister leers at her the whole time. Before Fumino leaves, Nariyuki gives her a bag with a special present inside for her birthday. When Fumino then checks to see what her present is, she finds out that it's a frilly new bra, which turns out to be the wrong thing that Nariyuki was supposed to give her, as he had instead planned to give her a special pen for left-handed people. Despite this, Fumino wears the new bra to school the next day, with extra padding to make up for the bigger size of the bra. Nariyuki then approaches her, and the two briefly talk about her present. But both of them are unaware that Fumino got the wrong gift, which causes further misunderstandings. Later that day, Uruka gives Fumino oven mitts as a late birthday present, while Rizu gives her some new chopsticks. But when Uruka then asks what Nariyuki gave Fumino for her birthday, she silences him by any means necessary to cover the fact that he gave her a bra. Confused by her reaction, Nariyuki takes her out in the hallway, and the two quickly clear up the misunderstanding, followed by Nariyuki apologizing profusely. But his statement about her breast size causes Fumino's heart to skip a beat. The next weekend, Kirisu decides to go to a local bathhouse, but on the way there runs into Asumi, Nariyuki, and his twin siblings, who instantly take a liking to Kirisu and ask her to marry their brother, which infuriates her. Once inside the bathhouse, the twins commit a mischievous act by stealing Kirisu's underwear. Meanwhile, Kirisu and Asumi share a sauna together and talk about Nariyuki's good traits. After they leave the sauna, Nariyuki's little sister begins pestering Kirisu to marry her brother, which annoys her greatly. But when the little girl begins to cry, Kirisu agrees to marry Nariyuki in order to appease her. Nariyuki's sister then runs to tell her brother, causing Kirisu to slip on a bar of soap while trying to chase after her. Because of this, Nariyuki is forced to carry her out of the bathhouse until she wakes up moments later and chastises him for his indecency. Nariyuki's little sister defends him, however, and in the process accidentally pulls Kirisu's towel off, embarrassingly exposing everything to Nariyuki. At the end of the day, Nariyuki and Asumi explain the situation to Kirisu, who forgives them in response and sheepishly apologizes too. After they part ways, Kirisu reveals to Asumi that she's going commando under her suit, which causes Nariyuki to realize that his twin siblings still have Kirisu's goods. Sometime later, Nariyuki learns that he is at risk of failing physical education because of his lack of athleticism, so he agrees to take extra swimming lessons. To his surprise, the usual swim coach has to leave, and she asks Kirisu to teach in her stead, which she agrees to despite being annoyed by this situation. Meanwhile, Uruka tries to help Nariyuki improve at swimming, but he unfortunately has the swimming talent of a rock, so Kirisu is forced to get in the pool and help him learn the basics. In the showers after class, Uruka admits to Kirisu that she is nervous about losing her next competition, but Kirisu gives her some advice and reassures her that everything will work out if she believes in herself and her training. Thanks to that advice, Uruka easily wins the tournament. And because of her great talent, the headmaster offers Uruka a chance to study abroad at an Australian university, but although she wants to go, she wonders if long-distance relationships can work. Uruka ultimately decides that, while she would like to study abroad, she still wants to keep this a secret from Nariyuki for the time being. Realizing that she would need to speak fluent English to study in Australia, she asks Nariyuki to tutor her even more. Sometime later, the school holds a parent-teacher conference, but Fumino's father does not attend, despite Fumino hesitantly leaving an invitation for him on the kitchen table. Suddenly, a university professor appears and begs Rizu to attend his mathematics course rather than pursue literature. Surprised by this, Fumino reveals that the professor is actually her father, Reiji, with whom she has a strained relationship. Fumino then restrains her father in order to allow Rizu to escape from him. Angered by this, Reiji tells his daughter that if she insists on pursuing foolish dreams, he'll kick her out of the house. Without much thought, Fumino agrees to this and Nariyuki allows her to stay with him for the time being. That night, Fumino remembers that her mother was a mathematics genius and that after she died, Fumino tried to do math just like her, but couldn't. As such, her father became upset and slapped her. The next day at school, Uruka notices that Fumino has the same underwear on from the previous day, so Fumino has Nariyuki help her fetch some clothes from her house, only for her father to arrive home earlier than expected. Not wanting to be seen by him, the two hide together in a very cramped cupboard and wait for him to leave. Once he's gone, Fumino discovers her mother's old laptop that Reiji had hid after she died. They find that it only has one folder on it and that it's password protected, which means that Reiji has not read it either. With only one chance left to crack the password, Fumino becomes determined to someday crack it. The next day, Nariyuki awakens to Fumino preparing breakfast for the both of them, and to both of their surprise, the food is edible. But Nariyuki has no idea what he's actually eating. Despite this, Fumino is happy that she was able to feed Nariyuki without poisoning him. Throughout the rest of the day, Fumino fails all of her chores around the house and heavily relies on Nariyuki for help. And after helping Nariyuki with his bath, she passes out on top of him due to fatigue. Nariyuki then brings her to bed, and when she wakes up later, he invites her to go to the top of a nearby mountain, where the stars are extra visible. That night, after he hears her talk so passionately about stars, he advises her to share this passion with her father, but Fumino is hesitant that he'll understand. Not wanting to run away forever, however, Fumino decides to confront her father at their residence, but he remains opposed to her pursuing what he considers to be a foolish dream. In response, Fumino gives a passionate speech about astronomy, which reminds Reiji of Fumino's mother, but it's still not enough to change his mind. So Fumino decides to show her father what was on her mom's laptop, which he thought was a math thesis. In actuality, it was a video message in which she confesses that the math thesis was a lie, and that she was never a mathematical genius, but hopes that Fumino someday pursues something she truly cares about. Fumino then goes outside and meets with Nariyuki, while her father continues to watch the video, where he sees a young Fumino visiting her mother and claiming that if she finds a new star, she'll name it after her father. It's also revealed that the password to the folder was Reiji's name. Back to Nariyuki and Fumino, the two talk for a while and enjoy a pretty romantic night together. The following day, Fumino and Reiji attend the parent-teacher conference together, and Reiji finally gives his daughter permission to pursue astronomy. Later on, Nariyuki reveals that his mother had secretly met with Reiji to give him the courage to reconcile with Fumino. And after having reconciled with his daughter, Reiji confronts Nariyuki about his relationship with Fumino and assumes that the two are dating, which greatly embarrasses both of them. The next day, Uruka asks Nariyuki what he plans to major in at college, but he realizes that he's been too preoccupied with his studies to have thought of that. Later on, as the school prepares for a festival, a rumor begins circulating that any two people who touch during the fireworks will end up together forever. Meanwhile, Kirisu decides that for her part in the festival, she'll do a lecture on the Roman Empire. To make it more exciting, the other teachers decide to put her in costume. Elsewhere, Fumino is coerced into playing Sleeping Beauty in her class play. Once the school festival begins, Nariyuki discovers that Uruka and the swim team will be performing an idol show, but Uruka's costume was unfortunately delivered to the wrong room. Afterwards, Nariyuki finds Kirisu wearing the idol costume, which she mistakenly believed was for her lecture on the Roman Empire. He attempts to take it off her so he can return it to Uruka, but the zipper becomes stuck, so Kirisu has no choice but to perform as an idol on stage instead of Uruka. Surprisingly, she does a good job mimicking Uruka's dance moves while lip-syncing. Meanwhile, Fumino marches around the festival, furious that no one will tell her who is supposed to be playing the prince to her Sleeping Beauty. Uruka then joins the performance alongside Kirisu, with an outfit that Nariyuki managed to create for her from memory. After the show, everyone celebrates their success until Nariyuki foolishly pulls a loose thread on Kirisu's already damaged costume, and everything immediately comes apart. Afterwards, Fumino's fan club promises Nariyuki that they will help sell Rizu's udon if he helps them with their play. This causes Nariyuki to mistakenly put on a cat costume, which the teachers had gotten for Kirisu to prank her. Asumi then sees Fumino being led to the stage and realizes that Nariyuki is in the costume, so she decides to show him a shortcut. When the fan club is unable to find Nariyuki, however, the headmaster announces that the play will be entirely improvised and asks for a volunteer prince from the audience. All the boys rush the stage to volunteer to be Fumino's prince, forcing the fan club to protect Fumino in a mad brawl. Nariyuki makes his way on the stage and manages to save Fumino from injury, but is immediately declared the prince, and to his surprise, Fumino kisses his mask on the lips, unaware that she is actually smooching Nariyuki. After he flees the stage and gets changed, Fumino is revealed to believe that it was actually Asumi that she kissed in the costume. But when Asumi denies this, Fumino becomes incredibly flustered, as she has no idea who she smooched. At the end of the festival, the time for the rumored jinx finally arrives, and just as the fireworks are about to be launched, Fumino, Uruka, Rizu, Nariyuki, Kirisu, and Asumi are all pushed into each other, creating a 6-person pile-up. But when the fireworks fail to ignite, and therefore the rumored jinx doesn't come true, Nariyuki is helped up to his feet by a girl, just as the fireworks go off for real this time. However, Nariyuki has no idea whose hand he's holding during the fireworks. Sometime much later, Nariyuki reveals that he plans to go to college to become a teacher, and thanks to Nariyuki's tutoring, the girls all pass their desired subjects. Uruka is accepted to the Australian University on a sports scholarship. Fumino passes mathematics and begins studying astronomy. Rizu passes literature and begins studying psychology, and Asumi is accepted into medical school. And after more time passes, the gang says goodbye to Uruka before she boards her flight to Australia, but Nariyuki is late. When he finally arrives, he ends up tripping and is helped up to his feet by Uruka, who lends him a hand, suggesting that it was her hand he touched at the festival, and that she's who Nariyuki was jinxed to end up with. In the manga, however, the final chapter shows alternate realities, where all the girls, including various secondary characters, end up touching Nariyuki during the festival's fireworks. And each girl is given her own special ending with Nariyuki, most of which end in marriage. Thanks for watching this anime recap. Let me know in the comments who the best waifu is.
Take you